then let's continue with the meeting. Colleagues may not be happy with the answers, but then they still have to follow the established mechanism to do things. Well, this is impolite to grab the officials' documents. I have asked those who have breached the rules of procedure to leave. So please respect the rules of procedure. Let's conduct the meeting accordingly. Government officials, you are unhappy with the behavior of the member. Please reflect to the same to the President. Dr. Fernando Zhang, followed by Mr. Alvin Yang. Of course, we should not grab other people's documents, but our government officials are snatching people's homes away from them. Well, the evidence is clear that there is collusion between the government, the business, and the rural forces. I'm not sure about the triad forces involvement yet. And you originally said that there would be 17,000 units, but then that has been cut to 4,000 units as a result of the soft lobbying sessions. After that, the rural forces and the district councillors for that district and the brownfield operators objected to the proposals because they have a vested interest, and you gave in. You are demolishing people's home and turning green belt sites into residential sites. You soft lobbied the rural forces, but you don't soft lobby the residents, and the evidence is so clear. And then we found later that you employ the same consultant as the private developers, and they use the sensitive information which shows the locations for your development. And then the property developer decided to hoard land there. So isn't that government business collusion? And the consultant is acting as the middleman, and that's so very clear. The story is out. The Mingpo did a report on what happened in the past 3 years. 11 proposals processed by the TBD are in a similar situation where the consultant involved leaked sensitive information from the government and to the property developers. 11 cases altogether. So what have you done to that? You said that there is no criminal element and you would not comment on individual cases. You have not brought the information along. What kind of attitude is that? Business, government, rural forces collusion. You are taking people's homes away from them. You are siding with the property developers, and they are hoarding land, and billions of dollars were involved. And you said that you have not identified any problem, and you were not even willing to meet the residents.
Now, when we ask for information, you say that we're out of order. No, so who is out of order? Why do you go for green belt instead of brownfield sites? Why are you demolishing people's homes instead of removing the vehicle scrapyard? The vehicle scrapyard is actually built on illegal occupation of land, 3.8 hectares. We have generations of villagers living there, and you're removing their homes. What is this government doing? Who stands to benefit from it? Ultimately, the consultant receives benefits from 3 parties, and you allow this collusion when villagers' homes are being destroyed. You have rural forces, and you succumb to rural forces. When you say you want to develop housing for the people, ultimately only the rich and powerful would benefit from it. Your time is up, Mr. Alvin Yang. Well, our meeting won't be adjourned until 10:45. Well, I'll save the time I won't ask a question. I asked Mr. Ma to go and retrieve the documents and come back. But the time should be used for asking the government questions. Well, it's very close. The government, the CGO is just next to the complex. It's very close. Please continue with your question, Mr. Yang. This is my question. Take a few minutes. Ask a colleague to go back and retrieve the documents so that we still have a quarter of an hour to read through the documents. No, that's not the case. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong already wasted several minutes. Even if we extend the meeting, we won't be able to ask all the questions. I need to deal with a motion in a moment, so please observe the speaking time limit. As we said after the meeting, Madam Chair, we will provide detailed information, our follow-up work, and the penalty. We are going to disclose the details after the meeting. So, Mr. Ma, do tell us what kind of details you're going to disclose after the meeting. I think Mr. Leung Kwok asked a very true question. The correspondence, if considered confidential, then what else is not confidential? We'll try to divulge as many details as possible. Before the chaos created by Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, in fact, a question was asked. Perhaps the secretary didn't catch it. Ms. Tanya Chen and other members just now asked about the contract, the clauses, and all the correspondence between the government and the consultant. Now, just now you said that you provide supplementary information after the meeting. So can you be specific what supplementary information can be released in the public domain? And are there any records? As I said just now, over the past few years, we will find the relevant records and consider the records and release the records in the public domain. As for the contract, it's standard contract terms, so I think that they can be disclosed. Whereas for the correspondence, I think it can be released partially. As for the engineering associated, the EACSB, we can also make public the relevant guidelines. It will be included in the follow-up paper. When will we receive the paper? As soon as possible, so you can submit the paper before our next meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair, for asking the questions that I wish to ask. Well, would it be counted towards your speaking time limit? Fine with me. I just see that you're not really asking the right questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, just now, Mr. Edward Yiu asked some questions, but I don't think the government officials have responded to him sufficiently, especially when Mr. Edward Yiu has put forward a plan. I think we can discuss this plan. So, Secretary, I still have some time left. Will you consider Mr. Yiu's suggestion for Phase 2 and 3 development? Mr. Yiu suggested how brownfield operations should be reprovisioned. After we complete the further study on Phase 2 and 3 development, we'll further look into the proper handling of brownfield operations. Multi-story buildings may be one way, and the government is not excluding this possibility, as Mr. Ma said. Just to supplement, we have about 1 hectare of land on short-term tenancy. We welcome these suggestions from members and will follow up on these suggestions. But I just wish to explain that we have an interfacing problem in relation to brownfield operations and the adjoining the residential neighborhood. We need to consider more carefully. We welcome Mr. Yiu's suggestion. Our colleagues will follow up on that. Dr. Kwok-haki. I think it was an embarrassment for government officials, but you need to understand that through and through, this has been a scandal. It originally should be a public housing development proposal providing 17,000 flats, but then we had the Pingshan Rural Committee and Zhengshu War's involvement, and then the development was scaled back to just 4,000 units. And no one would ever believe that no government business collusion is involved. And no one would believe that the site location had nothing to do with New World development. We gave you ample opportunity to explain, and you just repeat your answers like a human recording machine. You give answers in drips and drabs, and Mr. Ma wouldn't even bring along the necessary information to a electrical meeting. It's really shameful. And it's really a laughing stock to impose just a 3-month ban. Hong Kong is doomed if this continues. It's just a serious breach of trust, and the penalty is merely a 3-month ban. Let's be frank, in the coming 3 months, there won't be any major government projects for tendering. You have the background of working in a major engineering firm, so you understand the ins and outs, and you have not done anything to salvage public confidence. You continue to provide answers in drips and drabs. In recent years, Secretary, I see how you have turned to the other side because we have never been able to get any answer smoothly out of you. You only reply in drips and drabs. In relation to this committee, can you give us more details on some crucial points? Scaling back of development, not to mess with the brownfield sites. Apart from Zhengshu War, there are also vested interests of other stakeholders in the business sector, for example. And is C.Y. Leung also involved? Well, Dr. Kwok Ha-ki just made some very serious allegations. You don't trust the government. That's why you accuse us of telling lies. In a departmental meeting held by the chief executive in 2013, the purpose of the meeting was to decide whether there should be public housing development in Queen's Hill and Wang Chau. Altogether, there would be 20,000 units. It's a high-level decision which involved policy considerations. We understand that in Wang Chau there is a large area of brownfield sites. As for Queen's Hill, as a matter of policy, higher education institutions would be built. That is why, in the end of 2013, the relevant departments considered that if the concurrent development approach was adopted, there would be other problem. I'm sorry, I have no time left. Is C.Y. Leung involved in this incident, Secretary? So it has nothing to do with C.Y. Leung. We have the 3C meeting. Next. Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, at this meeting, many members question that there is collusion among the government, the business, and rural forces, and that we should conduct another round of consultation. As legislators, of course, we are concerned about these issues. But then, if we put a stop to the 17,000 unit development proposal, who stands to benefit? Who suffers? I see the slogans and placards in front of members' seats saying that the subdivided units are very costly. Now, if there is a delay in this project, ultimately, it will come from the taxpayers' money. So I want to ask members whether you support the expeditious development of Phase 2 and Phase 3 of Wang Chau. At least for FTU members, we support that. We believe that supporting and infrastructural facilities should be provided as soon as possible. Questions. First, about the Arab incident. I think that the public and members are shocked, and we are even more shocked to hear about the 3-month ban. And the government's answer has been very vague. Sometimes the government said that it was the EACSB's decision. Sometimes it is said that it's in accordance with the guidelines. So, Mr. Ma, I want a clear answer from you. I think that it should be handled properly because it involves a lot of sensitive information, and we need to have a clear mechanism in the future to prevent a repeat of this incident. Second question on compensation. Compensation is inevitable in any development project because of the stakeholders involved. They may be brownfield operators, indigenous villages, how they can be rehoused. I want to know whether you would adopt a more flexible and people-oriented approach. Some 100 households are involved. Now you have 4,000 public housing units to be built. They will not take up a large proportion. Why can't you take a people-oriented approach and rehouse them? Permanent Secretary. Well, as mentioned just now, we do have an established mechanism on compensation and rehousing. Affected residents would need to go through the assessment on income and assets of the housing department. Now, the villagers may not need to wait in the queue, but if they don't need to go through the means test either, then it may be problematic, because this doesn't just happen in phase 1 of Wang Chau, in phase 2, 3 of Wang Chau and other development projects as well. We need to use the same yardstick, and this yardstick should apply to those affected residents as well as other applicants on the waiting list. Mr. Frankie Yik. Oh, he isn't here. Mrs. Lau Siu Lai. Mrs. Lau Siu Lai. I want to ask a very short question for Mr. Eddie Ju. For phase 1 development, before its commencement in 2018, will there be another funding application in LegCo?
The Permanent Secretary. Well, with regard to phase 1, in terms of timing, we still have to do infrastructure works, road works, and site formation works. These have to be funded by the government. These are public works. We don't have the details yet. We have not yet come to that stage yet. And we need the FC's endorsement of the funding. Well, can you provide further information on when you will come to us for funding? And today we are very concerned about one thing. And this is very much a collusion among the government, the business, and the rural forces. And what kind of role do the consultants play in all these? If we quote from the report on Ming Pao, there are 11 cases involving disclosure of restricted information. And one of them is ACOM and Mr. Eric Ma. Well, before you joined the Development Bureau, you worked in the Asia-Pacific section of that company. Mr. Ma, when you worked in that position, have you actually misappropriated such sensitive information from the government for use by your clients? Well, can I be allowed to say something? members refer to the collusion among the government, business, and rural forces. I must point out that we have given certain information to the public in relation to such incidents. For a New World Development, the site next to adjoining Wang Chau, it is still the application is still being processed. There is no decision yet. We explained that the planning department has consulted the relevant departments in accordance with established procedures, and the relevant departments have clearly objected to the application. I'm not asking you a question. I'm asking Mr. Ma. Mr. Ma, have you misappropriated government's restricted information yourself? In the contract with the government, the consultant should not work for a third party unless the government's permission is given. Well, please allow the secretary to finish first. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong grabbed your information, but then you raised a strong objection. You said that you would complain against him. But when consultants misappropriated the information, well, last August, 2015 August, you knew about that already, but then you tacitly consented to it and you didn't follow up. And only after the media have exposed the incident did you impose a 3-month ban. And then you said that this was an isolated incident. But then Ming Pao said that this is very common, and Mr. Michael Chen also said the same. So isn't this kind of incident a kind of business government collusion? Now you imposed only a 3-month ban. Would you be prosecuting them? No, your time's up. I'll be using up my 3-minute time limit. Well, we have already drawn the line here. Sorry. Secretary, well, we are all asking questions on the consultant, but I think we should ask questions on the project itself too. Mr. Ma said many times that if we are to develop brownfield sites, the brownfield operations should be reprovisioned in multi-story buildings. But then Professor Zhang is responsible for logistics, overseeing logistics industry. Is this kind of proposal feasible? Have you considered how to consolidate the logistics operations on brownfield sites? Logistics industry contributes very much to Hong Kong's economy. Why the logistics operations are scattered in different locations on brownfield sites? It all has to do with the cheap rent of the brownfield sites. Have you really seriously studied into the brownfield operations in Hong Kong, and whether multi-story buildings is a feasible option? Will the logistics sector accept that kind of proposal? If that is not feasible, then the logistics will not accept it, and there's no use conducting that study. Yes, you are right. The logistics industry comes under my ambit. And I am also the chairman of the Logistics Development Council. Mr. Eric Ma chairs an interdepartmental task force to study the brownfield sites, and the THB has also played a part in that working group. And we keep a close dialogue with the logistics industry and tell them what our proposals are. Of course, logistics covers a wide spectrum, including, say, the lorries and trucks and so on. And as far as policy is concerned, we want to focus on how to modernize the logistics industry. Secretary, can the two bureaus, in relation to brownfield sites development, apart from having the Development Bureau coming up with its proposals, the THB should also consider how you will help the development of logistics industries. They are considering rehousing them in multi-story buildings, but the industry thinks that this is not feasible. the Secretary, you mentioned about ex gratia payment for affected residents and villages. There is an established mechanism, of course, but I hope that you can review this policy. The policy has been in place for a number of years. But then in Hong Kong, we are seeing so many development projects in different locations, and in each location, residents are affected. So I hope that you can come up with a comprehensive review. Mr. Frankie Yik is not here yet, so no time for him to speak. I've received a motion from Mr. Eddie Ju in accordance with Rule 20.0 and 22.0 and 22p, and that is within 1 month, the government should provide to members all information related to the Wang Chau project, including all the correspondences and contracts relating to the sensitive information used by Arab, and hand the information to the Development Panel and Housing Panel. And we should also convene another meeting of the joint panels. Well, you use the word misappropriate information. Whether the government agrees to that term, because it has already confirmed that already. Let me clarify. Including doesn't mean limited to what goes on between Arab and government. Different members are seeking information on various fronts. So if the motion is passed, I hope that different members can be given time to raise further requests for information. And such information should include all the correspondences and contracts between government and Arab in relation to the misappropriation of sensitive information. Well, I was hoping that we can hold another joint meeting in less than a month. Now, we were talking about holding a public hearing, and maybe in that hearing, the first item can be to hear public views, and the second item can be a session for our own discussions. So that should be able to address Mr. Eddie G's concern. But anyway, Mr. G insisted on moving this motion and imposing more pressure on the government. So let's consider it. And if we are to deal with this motion, we need to have a quorum, and we need to ask members to return to the meeting room. Oh, you're already doing that, all right? Do you agree that we should hold a public hearing? Any objection? If not, then later on, we will try to find a time slot to do that. And it will involve the Development Panel and also the Housing Panel. And I have to discuss with the Development Panel chairman, and I will do that. Mr. G, if we are to hold a public hearing, then will you still move this motion? If the government can agree that the members should be allowed to raise further requests for information, then I don't need this motion. Well, he's not been clear in his answer. We need the contract with this consultant, the contractual terms, and also the decisions of that selection board, and penalties in relation to misappropriating information, and also any examples or precedents of such misappropriation of information. And also, after the incident came into light, the correspondences following that. So can all this information be provided to us in the next meeting? Yes, we can provide you with a copy of the contract and the contractual terms. And also the information or decision of the EACSB, yes, we can provide information in that regard. And you talk about the relevant correspondences. We would look into that. We would try to provide as much information as possible. What about past records? Yes, that can be done as well. What we are most concerned is correspondences in relation to this incident so that we can ascertain the responsibility for this incident. He said that he would study into it only. He said that we hasn't a promise to do that. Well, we would look into that. Well, if members here are not happy with this answer, I'm afraid that we have to move this motion then. Well, Mr. Ju, they said that they would try to provide information you requested before the next meeting. The only exception is the correspondences. There may be correspondences which are restricted. I think they have to abide by, say, the restricted rules. So they may have to look into that as well. Well, let's do it that way. We don't have much time. I hope that we can go by the approach that I suggested. As regards the correspondences, Mr. Ma, please look into the correspondences and see whatever can be made public and make public that as well. Well, what we are trying to get is who should be held responsible. I think we still have the time to discuss that in the next meeting. Mr. Andrew Wang, well, we don't have much time. Well, your suggestion sounds reasonable, but going by the administration's response today, I'm worried that we would be seeing unexpected outcomes. Say, in between, well, if there are correspondences between the government and the consultant, at least the correspondence from the government can be made public, made available to us, because, well, he can make that decision, right? Well, this is not a working group or group established based on PNP. So even if we pass this motion, they have all the right not to disclose certain information unless this is a meeting invoked by PNP. Well, do we have the quorum to deal with the motion? I really would like to move this motion and deal with it. Well, let's see if there is a quorum. I have just 1 minute left. I have to end the meeting in 1 minute. Do we have a quorum? Yes? So let's decide on whether we would deal with this motion. Any member objecting to dealing with this motion moved by Mr. Eddie Chu? Dr. Lo Wai-kok, do we have to vote? Those who object, please raise your hand. Objection to dealing with Mr. Chu's motion. Those who support it, please raise your hand. Abstention, please raise your hand. So we will now deal with Mr. Eddie G's motion.
Now,
Mr. Eddie G's motion has been tabled. With those in favor, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. Abstentions, please. Motion carried. So that's the end of the joint meeting today. For the next joint meeting, you'll be informed of the time and date. Thank you.